Um, all right, hello everybody. Welcome to today's session. I'm Joshua Kogan with the Region 2 U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where I work on many of the agency's water programs and initiatives, including coordinating our Trash-Free Waters initiative. And I'll be your monitor for this session of the conference. We really have a wonderful panel today. It's with an impressive range of experience, from which they'll share some of their stories with us this morning. So I think it'll be an exciting morning on with regards to that. I'd like to start with a few technical items, namely, we will be using the chat function today in Zoom, and I'm sure you may have some questions or some things to share related to the presentations that you see, and if you do, by all means, find the chat the chat window and please type your questions for the panelists there, because we'll be sure to be reviewing those through the presentation and asking the panelists on your behalf at their conclusion. So find that functionality and use that. Additionally, you can use the Hoover community board as well. I can't offer too much more on that, but if you've been participating in the conference, you're likely aware of that community board. So that can also be a place where you can communicate and ask questions, and we will be monitoring both environments to make sure that the panelists get your question. If you need technical help, our first line of advice is to try to refresh your browser. If you still need help, then get into the chat and let us know what you're experiencing. We'll do our best. Sometimes these things are easy to kind of figure out, and sometimes they're not. But we find that refreshing the browser can be a good place to start. We ask that you remain muted. So if everybody can just take a look at the lower left hand side, the lower toolbar all the way to the left, and click on the mute button and keep that muted when you're not speaking. That'd be great. During the presentations, when we get to that part of the program, we will place the audience members on mute to ensure that we eliminate the background noise, as all of today's presentations will be recorded. In a bit, I'll begin with a brief introduction of each panelist, and it'll be brief, with more detail about each panelist just prior to their presentation. Afterwards, we'll shake things up a little. Everyone that's participating in this session, panelists and audience members, will join one of several breakout rooms, and we'll spend a few minutes conducting like a personal plastic survey, a very rapid plastic survey. And then subsequently, while in that breakout room, another few minutes discussing the results with the rest of the group in the breakout room. After that, panelists will serve as facilitators during the exercise. And, it's important to be loose and have fun with the process. The idea is to gain some insight and to share some perspective here. And we think it'll be fun and valuable. After the exercise, we'll be returned to the main conference. And at that point, we'll start the presentations, and each panelist will have, somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes to share their story through a presentation they've created. And that's where the magic kind of happens, and where we will be asking for your feedback in form of questions for the panelists in the chat window. So from a brief introduction of the panelists, you see the faces here, and a bit about them here. I have my slide set to a very small scale here because I'm looking at my notes. But today we have with us Lorenz, a local New York City-based artist, and we'll describe a little bit more about each person before their presentation. Kristin Ricigliano from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, and Koskol of the Hudson River Trust. We had planned Christian Murphy from the Bronx River Alliance, but unfortunately, Christian was in an accident last night and is doing well, which is great news, but unfortunately is just a bit kind of tired and wiped out from the experience. So Kristin won't have a chance to join us today, but we will certainly provide some information on the Bronx River Alliance, and particularly the work that he's doing to share here, so that folks can kind of follow up there. So we'd like to transition into the rapid survey now. So if I can get some technical support on kind of getting that process going now that we're all acquainted. Do we have something that kind of pops up and sticks us into the breakout rooms?
Yes, so we are about to send you all to breakout rooms. So we'll have about 10 minutes in each room before we come back in. So I'm going to randomly select, so just give me a second as I push people through. That worked.
Yeah, I think I set it up so that everybody had about 10. Only I think 2 rooms had 11, but Joshua.
Can you push? Yeah, can you push me into a room that needs? I think it's room 3 that doesn't have someone.
Yeah, hold on, give me a sec. You
Thanks,
should have, because you're Zoom too, right?
I'm Zoom too, yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Or I think I can join directly. Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead, try that. Hey, Tracy, we're all in breakout rooms right now. Were you able to find your way? Tracy, can you hear me? Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us. So we actually have people in breakout rooms right now. So I'm going to assign you to a room at the moment. So when you see the option pop up that says join room, be sure to click that. Hi, Robert. So the group is actually in breakout rooms right now. So I am going to assign you to a room. So for those folks that are just joining us, be sure to click the option that says join room when it pops up. Hi, Holly. I hope you can hear me. So we are actually in breakout rooms right now. So I am going to go ahead and assign you to a breakout room where we are doing an icebreaker exercise. So when the option pops up to click, join room, please be sure to click that and you'll be assigned to a room. Hi, Arthur. I hope you can hear me. My name is Liz. I just wanted to let you know that all participants are currently in a breakout room where they're doing an icebreaker exercise. So I'm going to go ahead and pop you in there. Just be sure to click join room when the option pops up. Hey, Bart, I hope you can hear me. I'm actually adding our participants to breakout rooms right now where they can do an icebreaker. Be sure to click the option join room when it pops up. Hey, Chantal. Can you hear me okay? Chantal, I think you're currently assigned to a breakout room.
Thanks, I'm sorry. I'm just
No,
little
no
confused
worries.
by the platform.
So let me try assigning you again.
Thank you. I was watching the garbage thing.
Just be sure that when the option comes up that says join room, that you actually click it.
Okay, will do.
Josh, you're on mute.
All right. I'm still sharing a screen, I believe. Is that correct or no?
Nope.
No. Okay, great. Awesome. So let me make a final adjustment to my life here so I can see where we are. All right, and open up as well the participants window so we can see the chats and all that stuff. Great. Chat. There we go. All right, so here we are. I hope everybody, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good time and you had a chance to you maybe learn from somebody else's experience there, or have found something within arm's reach or sight's distance that you weren't expecting to, or maybe even something that you've been planning to get rid of and haven't, because you just don't know exactly when or how to do that, and you're holding on to it. We're not going to do like a tally or a wrap up on all of the breakout groups. We're actually going to jump into panelists time right now. Let's move over to these notes so I can do the right thing. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker. Marie Lorenz is a New York-based artist that has been exploring and documenting New York City's waterfronts for many years. I took a look at her website. It's really cool. In 2005, she started her Tide and Current Taxi project, which is a rowboat built from salvaged materials to take passengers around New York City Harbor. They visit remote locations using tidal current to propel the boat. So what we'll do now is we'll set up Marie to spend some time, share her story with us. And again, use the chat function to get as many questions as you have there, and we'll conclude her presentation with some dialogue.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Josh. I'm just going to share my screen with some images. As Josh said, I'm an artist, Brooklyn-based. I've been doing this project since 2005 that I call the Tide and Current Taxi. The way that the water taxi works is that you email me a place that you want to go in New York City, and I study the tidal charts of the area, and I decide when we go based on the tidal current. And we go on our trip, we plan it, we go on our trip, and then with my pictures that I take on our trip, I make a blog post about the excursion. And I like to think about that blog where I've documented these trips since 2005 as an archive in space. They say, they say there's 520 miles of coastline in New York City. And I bet I have a photograph of almost every mile of that coastline somewhere on the blog. But it's also, I like to think of it as an archive in time as well, because I have pictures of that coastline all the way back to 2005. And I love to think that I'll just keep doing the Tide and Current Taxi as the coastline changes, as I change, as the boat changes. And I always love to show this picture when I talk about that archive in time, because this is from the blog. The blog has functioned the same way since 2005. And this is a picture from the blog in 2005 of one of the very first trips in the Tide Taxi. And we stopped to see a friend of mine who lived in an abandoned building on the Greenpoint waterfront, the old terminal market that burned to the ground. Maybe some of you remember. And he was a squatter that lived in that abandoned building. And we used to, the Tide and Current Taxi would like stop at kind of the broken down cement shore of that building, and he would come out, and I think we're drinking, like, he's serving us some like Jägermeister in a chilled little thing there, and we're sort of having a drink on his like patio. And so and there's things like that sort of inside the blog where like and so of course that area is being transferred, like, built into a giant glittering condominium now. But I always think of the, I call it an art project and not an actual taxi, because it's free. You can, come for a ride in the taxi for free. But there is an exchange, there's sort of an exchange that I describe as, you get to go for a ride in the taxi, but we might not always get where we're going. It's a rowboat in a huge harbor, and we're as subject to the wind as we are the tide. And so, sometimes the trips sort of go differently than planned, but I always get a good story. So that's the exchange. Like the ride sometimes works, but the story always works. So the exchange is a little bit weighted in my favor, I always joke. The project is about public space, accessing public space. The project is about connecting different areas in New York. Of course, that's the East River. And this is out by City Island in the Bronx. And these two places are only about 6 miles apart, and the Tide can take you there in a few hours, but you know, they're a world apart. And so I like thinking about the tidal current that connects these areas. And of course, doing the project for years as I have, the project has also become more and more about pollution, or I would say like the ways that humans have interacted with their landscape. That's in the Gowanus Canal, of course. Photograph shot from a balloon that I was like flying above the boat. And this is an island in Shooter's Island in between Staten Island and New Jersey. And I love this, I love going to this island because it shows something really unique about the New York Harbor, which is, you know, because it's a tidal estuary, there's the mixing of salt water and fresh water. There's also, you know, differences in temperature coming in and out of the harbor. And all of those things make for a really interesting, the harbor can sort of sort all this debris in really interesting ways. And so on Shooter's Island, this is sort of the north shore of Shooter's Island, and you can see all this floatable debris, balls, wood, like timber, nets. And then if you walk just a few hundred paces around to the east coast of Shooter's Island, you can see this incredible, the whole beach is made of debris that sinks. 100-year-old ceramic and glass, things that have been washing out of the landfills in Staten Island, New Jersey for years and years. Also some of the ceramic industry that was on the coast of New Jersey. All of that stuff is sort of broken up on the shore of Shooter's Island. And so some of my projects also use that debris. As I sort of find more and more of it, I became interested. Sometimes I feel like I'm on the cut, like looking at all the way that the harbor sorts all that out, I feel like I'm on the verge of kind of understanding some language that the harbor is speaking or something. And so I've done different projects about kind of the way that the harbor sorts the debris. This is from a series that I did in Jamaica Bay, printing things that I'd found in the harbor. This is a jet ski that I hauled out of Jamaica Bay, took back to my studio and printed in sections. And so this print, it's a contact print, same way that you'd make like a, some people know about like fish printing, and it's sort of done in the same way. It's done with sumi ink on kozo paper. And the print is about 11 feet tall and 16 feet wide. So the actual size of the jet ski. And this is a piece that I made in Buffalo, in a museum in Buffalo. It also was on tour, and it's over 1,000 porcelain pieces that are cast from debris that I found around the harbor. Also in Chicago, I made the piece close to Chicago. And the cool thing about the porcelain too is that when you fire the porcelain, the object shrinks slightly. And so all of these things were really recognizable, all the, you know, the construction netting, the fences, the styrofoam cups, but they were all like just a little bit smaller than you would sort of recognize them to be. And so that was just sort of an interesting, I don't know, it made them kind of cute or something. And so I guess like when you're working with, as an artist, when you're working with images, symbolism, metaphor, you're up against decades of those same strategies being used to sort of affect our minds. I'm showing this slide to be sort of cheeky a little bit. This is from 1955 Life magazine. It was an article about the kind of the joy of using disposable items in the household, how great that was going to be in 1955. But this image, as I'm sure there are people in the room who know much more about the Keep America Beautiful campaign in 1971. But this image, of course, is like, you know, people really understand the kind of the emotional impact that images like these had. And so people could probably correct me on this in the room. I'm sure there's people that know more about it, but what I sort of understand it to be is that Keep America Beautiful was an organization that was made by beverage manufacturers in America. And I'm going to sort of paraphrase this, but you know, I'm sure there's people that have a better thesis on this in the room, but basically to kind of take American consciousness and kind of place the blame for litter on the consumer rather than the corporation. There may have been some opportunity. I mean, there still is opportunity to really take companies to task for making single-use plastic. And at the time, there certainly could have been some big restrictions placed on companies for making that. And so this kind of let consumers fight it out about who was responsible for the stuff when it ended up in the streets and the rivers. And that kind of idea that we are, as consumers, really personally responsible for the litter that ends up in the waterways is still really, really strong and really pervasive. I think, you know, that 1971 campaign is just like hugely, you know, hugely emotional for a lot of people. And so this is an ad campaign by Live Green Toronto that was up in 2014. And I love this advertisement or this kind of campaign in its kind of like the way that it looks. I like the style of photography. I like this kind of hacking of the labels and stuff. It kind of reminds me of that rave culture, like brand hacking. But I just wish that it didn't say littering says a lot about you. I wish that this ad says allowing our companies to make single-use products says a lot about you, or says a lot about us. I think it should say ignoring our elected government's inaction on climate change makes you a low-life pig dipstick. But you know, those I don't know, those sentiments, those kind of ideas are way less. They're more complicated. And so I think that that is the role of art. Is to really, you know, I feel like there's been these pathways that have been cemented by things like Keep America Beautiful ads and all the, you know, these images that have way more reach than an artwork does. But I think an art's purpose is to kind of rewire some of those pathways, to kind of reconfuse us in a way, and maybe reconnect people to a more nuanced understanding of the environment, reconnect them to like a curiosity about the environment. Because I feel like in those, I feel like we've been so sort of hardwired by that kind of imagery, the two advertisements that I just showed, or the three, that that we sort of think we know the answer or think we know who's to blame when we see images like that. So maybe art's kind of, I don't know, most hopeful, you know, contributing force in there is to kind of like make it more confusing and make us like sit for a little longer with images and symbolism. And I don't know, I think that confusion and kind of like not understanding is a more useful tool than kind of thinking we know. And I think maybe I'll, what can I do here? Maybe I'll stop sharing.
Well, that's perfect timing.
Okay.
The folks that are kind of keeping track on that stuff are letting me know that this is around the time. So that's perfect timing.
You know what I can't do? Oh wait, oh there it is. I couldn't find my stop share button. Okay, awesome.
All right, awesome. And you know, I think that the project's great. You know, access to the water, you know, is really where it has to begin. Sometimes folks, you know, don't really feel the issue until they get a chance to connect with the resource. So providing that access is really wonderful, and you've been doing it for quite some time. So that's great. You have documented it so well. The pictures are wonderful. I'm curious. You know, things change. I'm sure you had a perspective earlier on, but you know, how has these experiences on the water over the years changed your perspective on the issue of marine debris?
Well, I guess you know, there's so much there. Yeah, there's so much marine debris out there, and there's so much, and that picture that I showed of Shooter's Island is a real beautiful kind of illustration of the range of things that are out there. But I guess I think the power of art, of the tide and current taxi, of the images that I want to show and get out there about Shooter's Island is, you know, we see, like, if you see like single-use plastic rolling down the street or something, because of those, the Keep America Beautiful ad or whatever, you might consider blaming that on somebody else, like who left their, you know, plastic bottle rolling down the middle of the street. But with an image like Shooter's Island, you can connect all of that floatable debris to the debris that's been washing out of landfills for like, you know, 100 years. And you can see this almost like core sample just on a beach, just by walking down the beach. You can see this almost core sample of things that we've been doing to the environment. Like you can sort of relate that to like a bigger industry and a bigger kind of attitude about the planet, I guess. And so that's what's important to me about the Tide taxi. It's not like focusing on this particular piece of plastic, but looking at those things in like this large view. I mean, the Shooter's Island was built to make like some kind of mine finder or something in World War II. Like they expanded the island out of trash to make this like ship in World War II. And so I just like thinking about if you were walking down the beach in Shooter's Island, you could actually connect like this plastic candy wrapper with this like nut from a ship in World War II, and you could be like, what's the connecting thread that makes those two things possible?
Very cool. Thank you very much, Marie.
Thank you.
We're going to conclude the questions for this particular presentation right now and move on to the next panelist. However, if you typed in a question, we've been, kind of like taking those out of the chat and putting them into another area where we can revisit those when all the panelists are kind of answering questions together. So we'd like to move on to the next panelist at this time. Kristin Ricigliano from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. Kristin is a city research scientist with the New York City DEP Bureau of Environmental Planning and Analysis, and she works in the Ms4 Compliance Division with a focus on monitoring programs. Kristin, are you all set up to take it away?
I am. Oh, yep. And thank you, Rosanna. And thanks, Josh, for that introduction. I'm just gonna switch my view here to get out of full screen. Okay, and I'm all set. So hi, thank you, Josh, again. Kristin, and I'm with DEP. And today I'm going to be going over the city's Floatables programs. Next slide. Okay, a little about DEP. Many of you are familiar with the agency. It's the largest water and wastewater combined utility in the United States. We deliver about 1 billion gallons of water each day to New Yorkers and treat about 1 billion gallons of wastewater each day. And we also regulate air and noise pollution and hazardous waste storage. So next slide. So here we have an overview of the city's Floatables program. It's a multifaceted program and it operates citywide. We have regulatory measures, including those that prohibit and include fines for littering and illegal dumping, public education and outreach, including media campaigns that connect that trash on the streets ends up in our water bodies. We have stewardship support for volunteers, source controls, that includes public litter baskets and street sweeping, catch basin inspection and maintenance. Catch basins collect stormwater and allow debris to settle before that stormwater enters into the sewer system. And we have ends of pipe and in-water containment systems. So those are our booms and nets that are in the water, and combined sewer overflow controls that are part of the long-term control plans. And we also have routine monitoring in the water bodies, and that's done by both DEP and volunteers. So the city periodically modifies, expands, or pilots programs based on lessons learned through our implementation, new regulatory requirements, and as well as when new opportunities arise. So next slide, please. So we have some recent program highlights here. For the regulatory measures, we have a styrofoam ban in place and a statewide ban on plastic bags with a 5-cent paper bag fee in the city to encourage New Yorkers to use reusable bags. Starting November 21st, so in a few days, food establishments in the city will no longer be allowed to offer plastic straws unless requested by a customer, and plastic stirrers and splash guards will also be banned. For source controls, we have a new Harbor Protectors program, which I'll go into more detail on towards the end of the presentation. For the City Cleanup Corps, the city took advantage of federal funding to hire workers for beautification projects. This included stenciling catch basins and cleaning sidewalks. And we don't expect this program to be permanent, but it's an example of how the city looks for opportunities to improve cleanliness and control litter. We also have an open water skimming pilot. In open waters, we're looking at using skimmer boats instead of booms and nets we found, through an analysis that booms were the wrong technology really for floatables controls in that type of environment with a lot of exposure to wind and waves. So we're adapting and piloting another tool to capture floatables in open waters. And we also have a recent media campaign. DEP implemented Trash It, Don't Flush It to spread the message that improperly disposing of trash can cause fatbergs, which lead to clogged pipes, sewer backups, and flooding. So the campaign included actions New Yorkers can take to help prevent fatbergs. This includes only flushing the 4 Ps, so that's pee, poop, puke, and toilet paper. Never flush wipes or other trash down the toilet, even if the box is labeled as flushable, and recycle finished toilet paper rolls and cardboard and plastic packaging. So next slide, please. So the city also has the Ms4 permit, and that regulates the separately sewered portions of the city. So the city operates 2 types of sewer systems. We have the combined sewer system where both wastewater and stormwater are carried by a single pipe into a wastewater resource recovery facility, also known as a wastewater treatment plant. And then we also have the separate storm sewer system owned by the city that we also call the Ms4. Wastewater is carried by one pipe to a wastewater treatment plant, and stormwater is carried by a separate pipe directly to local water bodies. So in the Ms4 areas, it's possible for trash on the street to be conveyed directly to water bodies by stormwater, and about 35% of New York City is served by the Ms4. So the Ms4 permit regulates those Ms4 areas and required that the city develop a stormwater management program that we call the SWAMP. So the SWAMP is designed to reduce pollution in stormwater runoff and to meet the maximum extent practicable standard for Ms4 permits. And so the city's Ms4 permit is actually unique in the fact that it has a specific provision on floatables control. So the 2 requirements that I'm going to highlight today are the interim media campaign and the loading rate study. So for the media campaign, the permit required that the city implement a public education campaign on floatables between 2015 and 2018. And for the loading rate study, the permit required that the city develop and implement a work plan to determine the loading rate for floatables discharged from the Ms4 to floatables impaired water bodies. And then I'll close out today's presentation by highlighting DEP's new stewardship program, the Harbor Protectors. Next slide, please. All right, the interim media campaign, Don't Trash Our Waters, Put It in the Can. So the city developed the campaign message, Don't Trash Our Waters, to raise public awareness of the connection between street litter and water quality. This campaign featured a series of underwater characters, including a dolphin, seal, whale, turtle, and an oyster. And here we have the oyster, who's my favorite. And it was designed to remind New Yorkers that trash on the street ends up in our harbor and hurts local wildlife. And then in addition to raising the awareness, the campaign also aimed to change littering behavior by asking New Yorkers to put it in the can. And there's the 3 different types of cans there. You have the trash and then the 2 types of recycling. So next slide, please. So Don't Trash Our Waters. In 2017, DEP, in coordination with the Wildlife Conservation Society, DSNY, Parks, and the Mayor's Office of Sustainability launched the Don't Trash Our Waters campaign. The campaign was implemented in neighborhoods where near water bodies where floatables are of particular concern. So this is specifically Coney Island Creek and the Bronx River watersheds. This multimedia campaign used bus shelters, subway stations, and digital ads to spread the message, as well as posters displayed on DSNY trucks and nearby parks comfort stations. For this campaign, the city worked closely with the Wildlife Conservation Society to organize an event at the New York Aquarium in Coney Island to give New Yorkers an opportunity to learn more about the impact of plastics in the ocean. Next slide, please. Great. The Ms4 permit required that the city develop and implement a work plan to determine the loading rate for floatables discharged from the Ms4 to floatables impaired waters. We call this the loading rate study. So in 2017, DEP submitted a draft of this plan to the state, posted it online for comment, and presented on the draft plan during a trash-free waters meeting. DEP then developed the final work plan, which was approved by the state in 2019. The permit requires that the city start the study within 2 years of that approval, which was March 2021, and the study needs to be completed within 3 years of starting, so March 2024. Next slide, please. So here we have MS4 floatables, sources and controls. So this diagram walks through the typical floatables sources at the local level and controls that are in place. So floatable sources are red, MS4 transport is in blue, and controls are in green. So as an overview of the floatables loading rate study methodology, we are focusing on the floatables contribution at the entry point to the MS4. This methodology utilizes institutional knowledge. DEP had previously studied floatable sources and the effectiveness of existing controls. We selected the monitoring site criteria based on important factors that we already know have an impact on the floatables discharge rates from catch basins in New York City, like catch basin hoods. We also have supplemental studies ongoing to monitor the effectiveness of certain floatables controls like street sweeping and catch basin stenciling. Next slide, please. So the methodology. The approach is to monitor floatables at 63 representative catch basins, then to use that representative data to assign a loading rate to additional MS4 catch basins that were not monitored, but have similar characteristics to those that were. Catch basin characteristics include trash levels, street sweeping frequency, and the presence or absence of a hood, or unique land use types like parks, arterial highways, and exit and entrance ramps. Once the MS4, yep.
Hey, Kristin, this is Josh.
Hey.
We have like maybe a minute or a little bit
A
more.
minute. Okay, great. So basically, once we have that information, we'll scale up. So you go to the next slide. So for data collection, we've been collecting samples on a weekly basis at these representative catch basins. And based on the preliminary data that we're seeing, the total volume of material collected at each monitoring site is directly related to preceding precipitation. And the majority of the material volume discharging from the catch basins is plastic, followed by paper and metal. Next slide, please. So our next steps are to wrap up the study, and our plan to do that is by 2024. And next slide, please. And then we have the Harbor Protectors Program. Next slide, please. So in 2021, DEP launched this program that includes events and training opportunities for interested individuals and organizations to participate in clearing off catch basin grates, stenciling educational messages, and conducting shoreline cleanups or rain garden care. Next slide, please. To become a harbor protector, check out DEP's website if you're interested in environmental stewardship, and DEP is looking to support you. So last slide, please. So thank you, everyone. And here's some helpful links. And if you have any follow-up questions after this presentation or the panel questions, feel free to send me an email. Check out the MS4 Harbor Protectors and Trash It, Don't Flush It. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristin. Sorry to jump in there with a 1-minute warning. That's a tough one to handle, but you did a wonderful job, and I think the presentation really laid out all of the things that that the city's working on here. So as a question, you know, the city is taking a multifaceted approach to address floatable debris and protect the water. From your own experience, what's been the most challenging aspect to reduce the marine debris?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. To be honest with you, I think it's just the sheer volume of potential floatables that exist in the watershed. You know, from the preliminary data from that loading rate study, you know, we're seeing that plastics is making up the majority of the items by volume that we're seeing in our samples. And when you look at plastics, and instead of looking at the end of life, you know, where we are kind of seeing it at the street litter level, and you scale back to the source, you just see some really unsustainable trends. You know, we have the overprotection and the over-reliance of companies on plastics, specifically single-use plastics, So you're just looking at a very massive scale. And I mean, given that, you know, the city does have a very effective program, even just looking at regulatory measures, you know, we have your basic anti-littering, no dumping laws, but, you know, we are lucky enough to live in a state where we have a plastic bag ban. I know some municipalities live in a state that have a ban on bans. So, you know, we're fortunate there, and we even have some really cool things coming online that are, you know, pushing the edges of where we can go and what's next, like the straws upon request. So, you know, we have the public education part of it too, just to raise awareness. And, you know, we're doing the research to understand the scope and the effectiveness of our controls. But I think at the end of the day, we're really just looking at like a very massive scale here.
Yeah, understood. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Or many challenges together as one huge challenge. Thank you, Kristin. For folks that typed in some questions for her based on the presentation, or something may come to mind, please get into the chat. We're taking those and extracting them from the chat into a separate document where we could, you know, circle back around with all the panelists that want to ask questions. So moving along, our last panelist today is Anna Koskol. Anna is the manager of environmental education at Hudson River Park and works to engage students and community members in hands-on river science and conservation. She also supports park-wide sustainability initiatives, including plastic waste reduction and education. Anna, are you all ready to set up and ready to go?
I think I am, Josh. Thank you. Thank you, Rosanna, for the slides. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Anna with Hudson River Park's River Project. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share an overview of our work in plastic pollution awareness and education. So if you go to the next slide, I wanted to first share a little bit about the park. We're located on the west side of Manhattan from Chambers Street to West 59th Street. I know a lot of you are very familiar and have been to the park before. Our park is comprised of historic shipping piers that have been recreated for public use. And uniquely, the 400 acres of water between the piers is also part of the park. It's a designated estuarine sanctuary. So this informs really the work of the department that I work in, the River Project. We conduct research to monitor and restore habitat in the park sanctuary waters. And we engage students and communities to participate in that hands-on science research and also in various education programs. So that research and community involvement and engagement brought about our plastic reduction initiative called Park Over Plastic. So go to the next slide. We have a giant logo about this initiative. It began in 2019, and its purpose really was to develop awareness on the impacts of plastics in our water in the Hudson River estuary, and creating actions and resources to fight plastic pollution within our park community and beyond, hopefully. So to the next slide, I just wanted to also highlight some of the initial steps that we took in the first 2 years. So we've really we wanted to increase opportunities for our park users to make more conscious, eco-friendly choices within our facilities, within our park footprint, and develop partnerships with our park tenants, which is a big part of Hudson River Park, and resources to support them, and of course, furthering our education programs and research projects to really increase that community involvement. Next slide, please. So like I said, this really all began with our research, with our science team on plastic debris in our waters. So these are just two charts sharing some of the most common types of plastics we find in our research. On the left side, we host volunteer shoreline cleanups where participants collect debris as well as cleaning up our shorelines, obviously, for our macroplastics research. So they're counting and categorizing and weighing all the plastic debris that they find on our shorelines. We operate from 2 shorelines. And then with our microplastics research, which was recently published in a peer-reviewed journal, looks at concentrations of microplastics in the park's waters, both in the channel and near shore at several different locations. So you can find these reports and way more information on this research on our website. If you like to dig into this more, feel free. And we do look forward to continuing our involvement with our community and local students in this work. Next slide, please. So yeah, engaging our community. We first started this initiative, Park Over Plastic, by looking within our own offices and staff. For example, we made updates to our waste streams and in our kitchens and our offices, providing trainings on how to compost your food scraps, and really just creating space to share the best practices and our, making commitments to be a more sustainable work culture. So we've developed tools and programming also to educate our students and the public. We teach field trip programs around plastics and plastic pollution, and we post weekly online lessons called STEM Activity of the Week, focused on plastics. We also run a high school summer research intensive called Includes, which the last few years have been focused on microfibers, and of course our volunteer shoreline cleanups, as I mentioned, as part of our macroplastics research. Next slide, please. And then I was saying earlier, our tenants in the park, so like restaurants and boathouses and all of that, they are a huge part of this initiative. They interact with the public as much as we do. So we've invited them to sign on to a green partnership, which is a commitment to reducing single-use plastics in their own businesses. And this is reflected in their annual contracts with the trust, as well as in their annual reporting. And our tenants are so vastly different from one another. They really are, and they have different needs. So we really have to meet them where they were, and thinking through the resources and the solutions that best fit their individual needs. So that's been an interesting learning experience for us. And we also are providing space for them to come together and share feedback, updates, best practices through an annual working group. And we also wanted to ensure that the park users, the people that are coming in and out of their park every day, are aware of how they can make positive decisions when they're visiting. So signage installed throughout the park, and providing those educational resources online. Next, please. So these are some of those examples of online engagement, educational social media posts, downloadable lessons and activities for students, and also sharing our reports and our data. And then the next one also has images. Next one. Examples of, throughout the park, it's facilities and signage that, and these are really just prompts to encourage visitors to be thoughtful about their plastic use, come prepared, and thinking about bringing their reusable water bottles, using our refill stations. And then the next slide, I think there's a map, so that they can do such things and know where to find their recycling stations and their compost bins located in the park, wherever they might be. Next slide. And then we've also developed a resource guide with plastic alternative products and best practices, also on our website. And then coming soon, we'll be sharing all of this and more in a toolkit that we hope can help other parks, organizations, businesses implement Park Over Plastics within their workspace, in their businesses, to whatever degree is possible. So next slide is about evaluation. Evaluation and metrics is also a really important aspect of this initiative. So we partnered with Knology, which is a local New York City-based a social science research organization that really helped us to study best practices for assessing how the initiative is building a sustainable community, but also then helping us to monitor plastic use in the park. So we conducted waste audits and park-wide surveys in the first 2 years. And you can actually find these results and the report on this study also on our website. But if you go to the next slide, there's just like, I can just share a quick overview. Essentially, the waste audits allowed us to just better understand ways for improving recycling in the park. The data told us that visitors need convenient options for recycling, and pairing recycling with landfill and when possible compost bins is helpful, and improving the messaging to inform those best practices in the recycling and waste stream. Yeah, next slide, please. So what's next? Wait for the next slide. We really, when we look into the future, our learnings and toolkit with the public will be really exciting to share. Oh yeah, we're on the slide, good. We'll expand our marine debris research to include floating debris from the water. So we'll soon be procuring a waste shark, pictured here. It's an aqua drone that removes plastic and other floating debris from the water, the surface of the water, which is something that we haven't been able to really do yet. So we're looking forward to this being not only a way to remove debris, but also a way to engage our students and our tenants. So using this as an education tool, we're really excited for that. And yeah, our science team will also be continuing microplastics research with NOAA next year by focusing on the toxicology of microplastics and how those toxic chemicals that the microplastics are attracting can impact wildlife health, which is really very much kind of the next stage, the next kind of question that microplastics research begs. So that'll be really interesting. And yeah, I think that's the end of, if you go to the next slide, I think my information is there. I hope you enjoyed this summary. And I definitely encourage you to keep up with us online as we continue to share more of our findings and our resources from this project. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate the work, and I also appreciate how each presentation is working on this issue in really different ways. I mean, there's a common way. Communication is really a big thing here, but there's nuance in how each organization or entity has to focus their resources and team and work with people that they engage with to work on this issue. And it was great. It's great to see. Question, and this is to kind of make that link to those that are our audience members today. How could participants on the call today take action to reduce their individual and or organizational impacts on plastic pollution?
Yeah, so I think it really starts with making a conscious choice each time you step out of your home. So as a consumer, we're met with decisions every day, big and small. And when you're prepared, you're more likely to make a more informed, thoughtful decision, a thoughtful choice. So that means developing more eco-friendly habits and making that the norm, not only within yourself, but your friend group, your household, your family, your community. So I know that within the people that are around me, we naturally just carry reusable water bottles, containers, bags, utensils, wherever we go, so that we can avoid making unnecessary waste. I think it's also important to experience firsthand what the need is in your community. So volunteering your time at your local park or beach, and finding out what local organizations are doing to reduce plastic pollutions, like Park Over Plastic, like Harbor Protectors Program, and getting involved there. And I think for a greater impact, supporting, legislation of bills that incentivize returning plastic products and kind of like what we've been talking about, putting the responsibility on the companies that are producing these products and actively seeking out businesses that prioritize sustainability and a circular economy. So there's definitely a wide spectrum of action that people can take. I think it depends on where your starting point is in that spectrum and building up from there. I think it's also important that we continue to educate ourselves, understand why this matters, both environmentally, of course, but maybe personally too, finding that value. And then, seeking to share and find more innovative solutions.
There's a lot of things that folks can do. Yeah, no, but it does start with the power that we all have in purchasing and considering what we purchase and how we handle and use and put to bed the things that we purchase. I agree. Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate that. So I promised everybody that when the presentations were done, we'd have some time to send off some questions and have more of a dialogue reply to those questions. But I'm gonna sneak in a live poll before we do that. Now's the time to kind of get that up. Oh, here we go. Great, it's happening. Of the marine or the floatable debris discussed by our panelists today, and I know that wasn't completely explicit, but there were pictures and things were discussed. Did you find some of the materials in your home office space as part of the rapid survey, on your desk this morning? Was there a direct connection? So just take a minute or so to answer the poll. About all right, 53%, 60% of people voted. Oh, this is cool. I've never been on this side of the poll, I don't think so. Seeing what's going on with who's doing what is interesting. I'm easily amused as well, though. So, all right. Going once, going twice, and it's done. Somebody hit end. All right, so it's closed. 27 people voted, and it looks like yes, there was a connection, because even the somewhat I think so, which I understand that answer, because we weren't focusing on types of debris and garbage and trash, but a good majority of us see the connection, and that's good. That's how we inform ourselves and equip ourselves to make different decisions. So let's see, get out of the poll. Now, moving along, we're going to have that moderated discussion and Q&A from the audience that I promised everybody today. So are all of the panelists off mute and present? All right, great. So let's start with some questions and see where things go. Let's start with COVID and kind of impacting the efforts. The question is, and this is open to all of the panelists, and feel free to kind of hop out and lead, if you will. Has COVID impacted your efforts, and if so, how?
Yes. For the loading rate study specifically, I have a few examples. In residential areas, the mayor reduced street sweeping, and basically if you had street sweeping more than once a week, it was reduced to once a week as a give to people who are encouraged to stay in their homes. So street sweeping is a really important factor to us when we're looking at street litter levels. So, we've had to adjust. We've worked more closely with our colleagues at DSNY to understand, what's happening out during the monitoring period. And we're also seeing, DEP had done a survey back in the 90s on street and sidewalk litter, and we're doing it today. And, when we get the results of the study, that's going to be part of it, comparing how trash has changed over time. And one thing that we did is we had to carve out for COVID specific trash, because we're seeing more masks and disposable gloves. And, this may just be an anomaly of when we've conducted the study, but we want to be able to make sure we can pull out that data to see if we need to correct for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I could, that's logical. How about Anna and Maria, any COVID related impacts to your work?
Yeah, I can quickly jump in and share. I think one of the biggest impacts just in general during the pandemic was the restaurant industry. And so we saw those impacts on our tenants. So there were like strict rules on food safety and packaging, so that required a lot of single-use plastics, unfortunately, just the way that it needed to be preserved and protected. And so that created more waste in general, because there was just an increase also of takeout orders. People were ordering out more, and so that required more containers. And so we really, we did switch a lot to products that are PLA or plant-based containers, although that's not truly a solution. So that was a challenge. And then, there's just an increase in outdoor dining. So our receptacles had to be cleaned out more often to avoid littering. So overall, the park was such a important a respite for so many people to be outside. So we had to be more thoughtful of the safe usage of our facilities and amenities like water fountains, in addition to waste management. So yeah, it was a challenge.
I think I agree with both Kristin and Anna. I think people would ask, because I was out in the waterways a lot, and people would ask is it changing like what you see out there? And certainly there were like more masks, more gloves and things, but really like what changed, and for me, like what I actually see in the water, on the beaches, like in these weird places that you kind of can't walk to, that's the flux and flow of that is way more related to the hurricane, like to the to stormwater and the hurricanes and things. I haven't totally related it to the pandemic, but what I did see when I was out, and I think this is sort of like an encouraging thing, what I did see, I spent a lot of time during sort of like the I don't know, like last summer, and during sort of for me, like the worst of the kind of restrictions and lockdown. I spent a lot of time like just alone in my boat, kind of going around the Newtown Creek, up in the East Branch, up in the kind of the end where like you can't really, there's not a lot of bridges over it. There's not a lot of public spaces along it. There's a couple little kind of park lit street ends that go out to it, but there's not that much access. But I would see people like walking down, like climbing over fences and walking right up to the water in areas that I never see people. I would see skateboarders, I would see families that had like hopped a little fence and gone right down to the water. So people were like opening up this space that they had, that I just never see anybody. And so I just thought it was kind of cool that like that kind of staying local. And instead of like driving out to, to the Rockaways or something, people were like, oh, let's look on the map and see what the absolute closest place that there's water, and sort of finding those routes down to the water. So it was sort of an exciting, like, that's like a big change that I saw that I feel like is kind of cool.
Yeah, we all have, I mean, the personal impacts are clearly a big thing that has changed our lives, but in our professional work, those impacts have been had and will continue to be had, and the adjustments will continue to evolve. Going into the bank of audience questions that were kind of written for each person, I'd like to start with you, Marie. What's the most interesting thing you encountered out on the water? And in that encounter, was there a floatable marine debris that impacted that experience?
The coolest thing I ever found was on Shooter's Island, that island that I showed you a picture of. I found this marble bust that was probably like 150 years old or something, and it's like somebody identified it as maybe like a piece of like a piece of a gravestone or something. It's this marble bust, and I found, like, I was walking along the beach and I found like this head. It was like, at first I found the back of the head. I found this like head of hair, and then like 20 paces later, we had sort of been walking around. 20 paces later, I found the face of the bust. I mean, I think it was like sort of went together, but it was like but it was kind of like, it's garbage, and then it was probably like, you know, probably a broken gravestone or something that was thrown out. But I think it's sort of like it made me look at the beach in this totally different way, where I'm constantly like looking for another like marble sculpture along the beach now. And I just like, and so I just think, like, you know, that I know this panel is about like floating debris and marine debris and how like terrible it is and stuff, but I also just like, there's also this really like that core sample that I was talking about before that brings us all the way back to, like, you know, we've been sort of treating these places like landfills for so long, and how can we kind of connect our behavior to sort of a pattern of behavior that we have for like the waterfront, and the idea that the river takes it away. And so I don't know, that's the coolest thing I ever found, is a marble face.
All right. Kristin, for you, we got a question in from Allison Deperte. The question is related to the interim media plan. Allison thinks this is wonderful, and she'd like to know, you know, how it was received. If there are any details you can share about the messaging and the public response.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say thank you to my colleague, Sarah Lepson, who saw this question in the chat and sent me about 15 bullets to answer it. So thank you, Sarah. And so after the interim media campaign, DEP did a post-campaign survey of about 1,000 New Yorkers across all 5 boroughs. So here are some highlights from that. Citywide, 31% of New Yorkers recalled seeing campaign images for Don't Trash Our Waters, with the higher portion of awareness reported in Brooklyn residents, which makes sense because, you know, we had targeted that Coney Island area. And so there's a bunch of different ways that it impacted their behavior. But a big highlight here is a strong majority, 88% of respondents said the images made them think that litter on the streets became trash in the waterway, which, you know, is really the heart of the message. And, you know, so it was received well. So thank you for asking. Great.
And I think a question that applies to everyone here, we do have to kind of consider the wrap up time here with 5 of. It's about engaging with communities and the response that you're receiving. However, it's really about, you know, sharing any, you know, techniques or tools that have worked for you for engagement, and more specifically, if you can elaborate, if it's appropriate, on ways that have been successful in gaining interest from portions or members of the community that haven't historically been engaged or received the communication well. So tools and techniques generally that have been effective, and you know, in addition to that, if there have been more targeted approaches to use those tools and techniques to gain even more, you know, momentum within communities or in areas of communities that have been harder to reach before.
I can jump in and share quickly. I think from an education standpoint, lessons and programs that closely observe plastics, that are like sorting, surveys, using microscopes, really help students and the public identify the various types of plastics. So just like the rapid survey we just did really opens eyes to understand our relationship, our society's relationship with waste. So, you know, for example, we have a plastic density lesson we do with students, and by the end of it, they can tell me the difference between a number 1 versus a number 2 plastic container, and it helps them make that connection on how they're being used at home and where it might end up. And in terms of partnerships with, we've built partnerships with Title I schools in the Bronx and local community centers that really were built around a series of programs where we take a deep dive into water pollution in New York City's waterways. We meet on a monthly or weekly basis to get that hands-on experimental aspect and learning about the sources of plastic pollution and creating solutions, which has been really helpful in building interest and a community around sustainability in the classroom. So yeah.
And to jump on that too, you know, my specialty is monitoring programs, not implementing the education programs. We have great professionals here at DEP who mainly take on that work. And I would just say from my perspective, I think at the end of the day, having legislation in place and item bans, it removes the action of a person going to the grocery store and they're just handed the plastic bag and the cashier already put the items in the bag and then have to say like, oh no, take it back out. I actually have a bag with me type of thing. You know, when you start going further upstream and then, you know, the onus isn't put on an individual person, you know, just you're going to see actions adapt. And of course, educating people as to why it's important and all of that is very important and a great work. But just from like a monitoring point of view, it's just like, if this stuff didn't exist, then it wouldn't be here, you know?
Very true. All right, so we're getting to the 12 o'clock mark. That we're really at the place where we have to conclude our time, you know, during this session today. And I'd like to thank our speakers for, you know, not just their work in this regard, but as well as for their time and preparation for and participation in this event. For the audience members, you know, please don't forget about the Hoover Community Board. You could still connect with other folks there on this topic, as well as those that weren't part of this session, and keep the conversation going, share links, etc. I also encourage everybody to, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the programs and initiatives and the folks that talked today, to check out whatever links they have provided in their bios in the Hoover environment. That's a place to kind of learn more. And we'd like to announce that in a half an hour, we will begin our final session of the conference and welcome everyone here to join Congressman Tom Malinowski and Nicole Miller, co-chair of the Jersey Waterworks Steering Committee, for a presentation and discussion on how to realize the opportunities and challenges presented by the bipartisan infrastructure deal, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, for water infrastructure and addressing the climate crisis. And with that, I'm done moderating today. And Rosanna, is there anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think you did a perfect job. So thank you everyone for joining. Enjoy your half-hour break, and we'll see you at 12:30.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.